Welcome to the Greater Wealth. I'm Travis, all the way from Ha Long Bay, Vietnam. And we've got Derek there on my screen. I don't know what side on the screen you're on, Derek, but anyway, all the way from the Perth studios. You're a little bit dark there, Derek. Are all your lights on?
Not sure, mate.
Oh, that's
I
all
think
right. It's all good. If Aaron's listening in, just turn the gain up a little bit on the camera if you don't mind. But anyway, so what an interesting fortnight. I've missed last week's show, and I think I might have missed the week before that one as well. But God, Trump is having a blast in messing with the economic markets. He's messing with foreign powers. He's messing with everyone in an interest to restore American economy and manufacturing. Just he's holding true to his promise of making America great again. And a lot of people, especially the ABC, are pulling their hair out, losing their mind. So, Derek, I'm going to throw it over to you.
I wouldn't want to be the receptionist at the White House at the moment. I mean, can you imagine how many calls are coming in every minute, every second? It'd be a full-on job and role at the White House. Look, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's like the cat amongst the pigeons. He has really got everybody hopping. And I think inadvertently, he has shown to the world how big his database is in terms of how many nations the United States actually exports to and does business with. So it is a big customer base that he's got. And not all those other nations, I think, have realized how big the US is. And it's like, take a number. If you don't do it on our terms, if you're not operating on our level, then take a number. And he warned many nations to, do not retaliate in these terrorists. And of course, the one nation that's retaliated the most is, of course, China. And so it's been back and forth as far as, well, we'll raise you to this, raise you that at 125%. China has raised tariffs on US goods to 125% in retaliation and said, this is the last one we're going to do. It says, we don't consider them worth matching. It's a joke. Beijing raising the tariffs on all US goods from 84% to 125% starting April the 12th. And the Ministry of Finance said that the US clarified that levies on Chinese goods rose to 145% this year. So given that American goods, he basically said, given that American goods are no longer marketable in China under the current tariff rates, if the US further raises rates on Chinese exports, China will disregard such measures. I think it's really funny because you've actually exposed how reliant you are on the US market as your customer base. And it's this back and forth. The people are going, this is crazy. Who's going to back down? Who's going to give way here? When does the ego stop? It's kind of like China saying, we're going to raise it to this, and after this, it's a joke. We're not going to do this anymore. So the politics of this is just really fun to watch as far as being on the sidelines is concerned. We've lost Travis on that. Okay, cool. So we'll keep going here. So what's been going on is all the nations of the world have just been lining up and watching this play out. Now, as these American tariffs are rolled out, China has warned that it will resolutely counterattack and fight to the end if the US continues to what it calls infringe on its rights and interests. This is a really fascinating article that came out on Bloomberg, the UK. And what it's going on about is basically S&P 500 has just dropped drastically last week with all the turmoil in the stock market, making it very, very hard for traders to kind of know where to put their money. And what do we do here? It was a lot of turmoil going on in the markets. And what really is interesting is what's the fallout of that as investors head for the hills. A lot of those traders who are volatility type traders, they love these kind of conditions. They're going, lap it up, lap it up. We teach a lot of this at Blue Sky Factory inadvertently in terms of how to trade those volatility markets. Those sort of things, look, they make great headlines. They make fantastic headlines for the news. The news love the lines, billions lost and wiped off the stock market, all that sort of thing. And as what really actually happens is that money changes hands. It doesn't actually is lost and disappears into a black hole, never to be seen again. It's simply those losses are on paper in many instances. Sometimes they're realized gains, sometimes they're unrealized losses, I should say, or unrealized losses. But those headlines, I kind of look past them. I don't really find them helpful, except for the fact that, hey, if I'm looking for volatility, well, I go talk it up, talk it up as far as those headlines are concerned. But the interesting part about this is you look at the geopolitical side of it, it's changing the dynamic that Beijing and Washington have related to each other in the past. I've mentioned before the whole BRICS nations. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, it's a conglomerate of nations that decided to trade together. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa as the 5 nations who made that conglomerate up. And they have been doing deals together to the extent of, under the Biden administration, they were doing things like selling oil to each other, which was unheard of under the agreement that Saudi Arabia had with the US, which did not renew in July 2024. That was pretty much an act of war. If you decided to trade with another nation and weren't going to do that in US dollars, it was seen as, well, I mean, look at what happened to Gaddafi, look at what happened to Hussein in those instances. And so those acts basically really changed in the last administration, where the BRICS nations were starting to do deals, sell oil in their local currencies, whether they be rubles, whether they be the yen, and this sort of thing. And so this dynamic of the BRICS nations is really changing in this argy-bargy with Washington now, because the US is dealing with all these different nations on different levels. So let's have a look at what they're dealing with. Brazil really hasn't come into the picture as of yet. It's more the internal issues in Brazil that's taken focus on the international stage as opposed to how it relates to other nations. But if we look at Russia, of course, there's the situation, of course, with the conflict with that, and of course, Ukraine. That's had splash effect also on Europe as well, the old guard, as far as those who are concerned about the defense of in the NATO agreement with the United States, where they sit here. You look at, so Russia, I think, want to do a deal. They've indicated they want to do a deal. And I think, I'd hope they're sincere in that, because the bloodshed's been absolutely nuts as far as that conflict is concerned. And Trump keeps highlighting it. Thousands are dying by the week. We've got to end this. We've got to end this. And so that's one of the BRICS nations that we're dealing with. Ukraine is not in the BRICS. Neither is it in NATO, and it's wanted to, because if you do that, then they get support of the United States, and Trump does not want to be dragged into that conflict. You also look at the other nations that are in the BRICS. You've got India. Now, India wants to do a deal as far as these tariffs are concerned. They're emerging as one of the biggest economies of the world, massive population, particularly in services industries. You would probably get a lot of those phone calls in the past wanting to do IT services for you, that sort of stuff. They're trying to hit that niche in offering that to the world. And the interesting thing is that they want to do a deal. They want to be cooperative. Their prime minister has shown that. Then we've got China. Now, China, of course, as I've highlighted here, the argy-bargy between the two, they've been more resistant, but China can't afford to do this. They can't get too, they can't lose their biggest customer. That's what's at risk here, because internally they've got huge economic issues in China. The real estate market, some time, has been in massive trouble when they're making cities that nobody lives in and building them. And then they've got a declining population at the same time. They've got some real pain they've got to work through. And of course, you had the big Evergrande transaction, where that property deal in China has caused major disruptions right through to the banking system. And you've got citizens that are actually nervous not being able to pull out their money. They've had a lot of smaller Chinese banks being taken over by some of the bigger players within China. And a lot of customers there are, I've seen numerous videos leaking out of China where they can't get their money out. Local citizens are complaining about this. So this is a huge problem, because if you've got unrest at home, well, that's not good in terms of maintaining order. And I think they're probably the most vulnerable of this, the Chinese people who are doing it tough and working in these factories, because if China loses that, then it puts them in a whole different, that could cause internal issues as people rise up, because people will rise up if they can't feed their families, if they're struggling to access their own money. So you've got
exactly.
You've got that
So,
going on.
Oh, hang on, just one thing to support your comment there. I've been watching a YouTube channel called China Observer, and they were talking about youth unemployment and what's going to happen in these factories. They're already at 25% before the tariffs got put in. If you start shutting down all these factories, how high is youth unemployment going to get? How much is this going to snowball? Just not in the youth side of things, because the youth are paying for their families to survive. Because remember, China's also got an aging population as well.
Yes.
So it's a massive snowball effect.
Massive. And yes, I think people forget that with the aging population, they don't have the numbers to support them in retirement. So it's a huge social dynamic that China's going to have to be facing in the next 10 to 20 years. What you've also got is the other BRICS nation. These are the primary ones. These are not the ones that have come in after the major ones. It's South Africa. Now, South Africa is gearing up for the G20, where all these nations meet together and discuss geopoliticals and they do their deals together. And Trump has been highlighting the internal problems of South Africa, where white farmers have been losing their farms due to this movement, who have been promoting kill the boer. That's the slogan that they've been doing at their rallies, jumping up and down. And none of the press, none of the media around the world have been highlighting this. And, you know, if the shoe was in on the foot, if white people were saying, hey, black people should die, kill them, the media would be all over it. Now, that's a huge concern in terms of censorship. But Trump's going, why should we hold the G20 there in this nation? Look, South Africa is a very violent nation. They've got huge issues internally in relation to crime and gangs. How do I know? I've been there. I haven't been there I haven't been there since the 90s, and I've heard it's gotten worse from South African friends that I have here in Perth, and there are a number of them. This is a huge, huge concern. Not only that, the dynamics of South Africa have changed. You now have, in relation to the political correctness that came in, many qualified people losing their jobs simply because of the color of their skin. You basically had racism in reverse, but still racism, where white people now are in the slums and in poverty and can't, you know, they were the middle class or well-off class, and now they can't get work simply because of race. And so you've got all these dynamics going on that aren't being highlighted by the media. And so here comes Trump with his tariffs causing waves. And now he's relating to the BRICS nation, not as a conglomeration, not as a group, but individually. It's a similar approach that we see happening in Europe, where he is preferring, I think, to deal with nations in terms of recognizing their sovereignty from the European Union, as opposed to dealing with the EU on a whole. I don't think the EU like that. It's like getting just totally ignored. I want to do a deal with you. And he's like, I'm not paying attention to you at all. And so how can you negotiate from that when the other party doesn't want to come to the table or to the gathering? And that's what's really disrupting him. So a lot of the old school are grieving globalization, going, this is the end of the globalization, calling it. I'm going, fantastic, because there have been so many controls going on in that dynamic. And the world is now really reassessing how it relates to this new administration, because when America sneezes, the world feels it. Well, we're not just feeling a sneeze here. This is somebody doing bomb diving off the big high board in the pool, you know, doing the horsey jumps and all that, and creating a massive splash. Everyone is feeling it.
Yeah. The funny bit is, when you describe it like that way, I can just see China bobbing in the water and then Trump coming through doing big cannonball right next door to him, saying, right, pull your head in. So first of all, I'd go a big shout out to Josh and Damo, who's back on watching live again. They're regular all the time. They're bound with good insight, great chats. Also put a bit of a plug in there for your own business there, blueskyfactory.com.au. Derek, considering how turbulent the times are, Derek's got some amazing courses teaching people not just how to survive and endure what's going on, but actually how to prosper during the time period, because when there's chaos, there's a heap of opportunities. And I do have to say sorry to you, Derek, because you did carry the show there for about 5 minutes, because I forgot to turn my VPN on, and so my camera got disabled and I had to do a full system restart halfway through your monologue. So thanks for covering my backside with that one.
Oh, good. Oh, good. So what's really fascinating about this is, so this trade tariff war, how high will it go? And I think that was the question that everybody was asking what was going on with China doing tit for tat as far as those tariffs were concerned. What actually came out of that was China basically said, do you want to join us? There's a great article that came out from Breitbart.com. And they were saying Australia rejects China's plea to join hands against Trump tariffs. What was going on was they were declaring on Thursday that it's happy to keep negotiating with its long-term ally rather than join Beijing's chorus of agreed opposition to Washington. So it's kind of like, hey, this isn't working. We want to see numbers. Who's on board with us? We don't like these tariffs. Remember, Australia only got 10% compared to what China's getting here. In the hundreds.
Remember, there's still the 25% on aluminium and steel, which is going to affect some Australian companies. But like BlueScope Steel actually have factories in America that they're powering up again. So the impact is going to be minimal. Really interesting. Apparently, no other country has joined China in their calls to retaliate tariffs against the US.
Yeah, it is. And because Trump basically said, if you do, then we'll double your tariff. If you automatically bang. So and he means business. He's not mucking around. I think the political leaders have realized this, and they've got to weigh up, what do we do here? Particularly if you're in the West and you want the defense benefits of being linked to the United States, you're not going to argue over a 10% tariff. You can't. It's just the timing of it is really, really bad for the Labor government as they head towards an election.
So as far as I'm concerned, the faster Labor can get out of power, the better. But at the moment in Australia, Liberals aren't much better. I just hope all the minor parties can actually start forming together to actually do something positive rather than just sitting there bickering amongst themselves. The bit that I'm loving the most about what's going on, China, during the last lot of tariff wars that they had with America in the previous administration, they did two things to cover the costs. They devalued their currency, and then they started importing, and you'll notice Vietnam had a 96% tariff on America, and they went to, I think it was a 46 retaliatory tariff, then plus everything else on top. China was actually sending a lot of their stuff to Vietnam, then Vietnam was forwarding it through to America, and that's how they were doing it to avoid the tariffs. So Trump's just, if you have a look at all through the Southeast Asia, all the different countries, all the really, really big countries that are getting slapped besides Canada and Mexico, they're all the Southeast Asian countries, all the ones that were trading partners with China where they were like funneling just doing the roundabout to get around those tariffs. That's not happening anymore. And then you also have a look at all the companies that America said, I don't care who you are, what country you're from, you're not trading in America. You'll find a lot of those companies are all based out of China as well. So not only have they imposed the tariffs, they've also blocked their ability to be able to get into the country through the backdoor methods. So it's insane the level that Trump's gone to prevent China from doing a workaround this time.
Everybody got a tariff, even Israel. Israel got a tariff, and even Argentina, who, Malay is a big Trump fan. And I think so. There's nobody who can say that's not fair because they didn't get one. Everybody got one.
It was a flat 10% across the board. So we have the same. We've got a flat 10% across the board to everyone. It's called the GST. Most countries have this anyway. So, tax one way is standard. It's just common practice. So I'm just going to Josh. Really interesting comment here. I can't believe Labor hasn't gotten rid of Rudd as ambassador to the US. Trump hates him. I have to admit, there was an article in the ABC. I've got it on my other screen here. Just let it reload. The article was from, I think it was the 12th of March. Donald Trump rejects Australian bid for exemption from steel and aluminium tariffs. So I've heard it was reported that the reason he rejected it is because of no free speech, no exemptions. And I strongly believe Kevin Rudd and the comments that he made against Trump and the US government, I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the contributing factors for this one. Oh,
big time. Big time. Why hasn't he been pulled off duty there is just extraordinary, because a diplomat can never give his personal views. He has to represent the view of the government in charge that he represents, and he's broken that rule by putting out the rhetoric that he did. And so I just think it's extraordinary that the Labor government haven't done that. Are they trying to do that because they don't want to highlight that? I don't know. I just, or is that because they really feel that way? This is just extraordinary that Australia is being represented through this kind of representation. I don't think it's helping the cause, and it's probably meaning that's why Trump's not returning the phone call.
So there's another way to look at this. Don't forget, Kevin Rudd is fluent in Mandarin. He's actually done a lot of study in China, and he's got a very, very heavy connection to the Chinese government. So I'm wondering if he is actually taking instructions from Australia, or is he taking instructions from China?
I think there's a lot of people questioning how close is Australia's ties to China. And I think it's a fair question in relation to, they have a base, they have access to Australian land in here. How on earth did we allow that to occur in this nation? And so I think there's not enough discussion of this in Australia. We need to have that discussion. We need to start talking about this. I don't think it's a case of, hey, we're going to take sides in terms of do we pick United States or China? But there are some who are arguing Australia is going to be forced to make a decision here because, it's getting to the pointy end of that discussion. Is it premature yet? I don't know. It really comes down to I think it comes down to values. And I think that's the one that's going to rule out which nation holds similar values to your own in terms of the direction that you want to go or best represents your nation. I think it's going to probably come down to that if a choice is required.
So I can't believe I'm putting this guy forward. The best diplomat in my time that we've actually had, and I've just pulled up a list of the diplomats. I hate to say it, I'd love to see Joe Hocking back as our diplomat.
Okay.
I just thought, even though he was so politically motivated one way rather than the other, in his dealings, and I've been watching he's done a lot of interviews on Fox News in America, Sky News in Australia, on what's actually going on because he knows the American system very, very well. His opinions he put forwards is always on the basis of what's in the best interest of Australia. He never actually let his own personal political views come into light on anything that I've been able to see. He's, from a diplomatic standpoint of view, I think he's just been really, really non-biased on either political side, and it's always been Australia first. And that's what Trump supports. He's always America first, do what's right for the American people as a whole. And I think as a diplomat, I think Joe Hocking actually has done that quite well. Where there's other guys, obviously Kevin Rudd we're talking about, there's Arthur Sinodinos, who was the Australian diplomat for 3 years. You've also had Kim Beazley. I just thought he was pushing the Labor line too much. So in recent years, I think, Joe Hocking, I hate to say it, was really good.
Beazley can't be Australia's diplomat to the United States anymore because he's come out publicly supporting the Biden administration. I heard him say it they were watching the election over at the University of Western Australia. He did not want Trump and saying, if Trump gets in, this is terrible for Australia. So, sorry, you're disqualified as a diplomat to the US now.
Spot on. And that's why I'm saying, like, a doctor should be exempt from political opinions. A diplomat should be the same. You're there for the Australians, not for anything else. A doctor shouldn't be pushing in political beliefs, same as teachers. You're there to do what's best for the students, teaching them how to be normal, everyday people, how to think for themselves. You're not there to push a political agenda onto kids. And I think this is exactly the same situation. Our diplomat needs to be there with their focus on what is absolutely 100% best for the Australian people. And Kevin Rudd is not one of them, neither is Kim Beazley, especially considering his daughter is a member of Parliament for Labor.
Let's have a look at some of the footage that Trump has said. He's actually put a exemption on the nations that haven't retaliated and given them 90 days of breathing space, which is an interesting move given the argy-bargy that's been happening between Beijing and Washington. Take a look at this video.
You're thinking about why you decided to put a 90-day pause.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, they were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents, they wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it. It's for a short period of time, but we made $2 billion. We're making now $2 billion a day. And somebody had to do it. Roger actually said it. Charles Schwab was here a little while ago, one of the great financial people, and he said he's been waiting for 40 years for somebody to do what I did over the last month. And if you didn't do it, you wouldn't have a country. It wouldn't be sustainable. So I'm honored to have done it. And, you know, look, nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well. And they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal. And we have many other countries, as you know, many more than 75, and they all want to come. And they want to come here, or they'll go to Commerce, or they'll go to Treasury. We have our great senators here and congressmen. They'll call John. They'll do somebody. They'll go through somebody, but they're all calling. How do we do this? They all want to make a deal. Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate. So we'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to work out amazing. I think that our country is going to be at the end of a year or shorter, but I think we're going to have something that nobody would have dreamt possible. A man like Roger Penske, I don't want to get him in trouble with China, so I won't, but he would know that you have to, someday you have to cut the bow and you have to do what you have to do, right, Roger? And that's what I did, and I'm very happy to have done it.
So there you go. 90-day reprieve for those that didn't retaliate. It's extraordinary to think that they're making $2 billion a day against China alone in terms of those terrorists now. And when you consider the amount of interest that the United States is paying just on its debt per day, that's going to help big time. I mean, that's what, $14 billion a week. And the US national debt at the moment is at $36.7 trillion when you look at the US debt clock. And that's a lot of money that they've got to deal with. And, that's certainly, as they're cutting those costs internally, certainly going to help them in terms of trying to balance the books once again.
The other thing, a lot of people aren't, Trump's whole approach to this has always been a all of government approach. So not only have you got the cuts that Doge has been doing, you've had the tariffs that have been imposed worldwide, which is bringing more revenue in. But the other one that that a lot of people aren't really taking into account into this the whole process is the investment from major companies like Apple, Nvidia, the supercooling conductor company from Taiwan. I think there's up to nearly $7 trillion of major infrastructure has been pumped back into America. So that's not a one-off injection. You got to remember, so all of those investments are going to generate, first of all, you got the initial deposits into the country. You got the ongoing jobs for the construction of the factories that are going, the manufacturing jobs within the factories as well, then constant turnover of stock and supplies and stuff like that. That's huge. I don't think a lot of people are actually taking into account what these tariffs have actually done to the US economy as a whole. And once the US economy is back into a surplus on their budget, I think it's the first time in 44 years or something, that is going to be absolutely massive worldwide, because if America's got money to spend, we've seen it in the past, America loves spending money. That's how they got themselves into debt in the first place. And that's going to boost the global economy as a whole as well. So just for Josh here, China needs us. We have the highest quality iron ore in the world, and it's right next door compared to the next best, which is Brazil. So yeah, China's going to be suffering.
I think they really need to think carefully how they move forward here, definitely in terms of how they work with the United States. And I think, in fairness, I think Trump had a very good point there. They're proud people, and they'll figure it out. They'll come to some sort of deal. But yeah, it's extraordinary what is going on there. And I'm just looking at the debt clock in front of me. Of course, all the numbers are flashing on my screen as they do. But to see the amount of interest that Americans are just paying every year on debt, it's just extraordinary. The trillions and trillions of dollars that they've got to pay. And, the biggest spenders are called Medicare or Medicaid, Social Security, which is really concerning because Social Security is under threat. The aging population in the United States, if they lose that, what are they going to do? It's going to cause huge social issues, but it's an unfunded liability. They can't afford to do that. And of course, then you've got the defense spending as well.
Yep.
Those three things are their largest budget items.
So I think the Medicaid is going to sort themselves out. Like our NDIS over in Australia, it's just full of rot. And that's, I don't want to say corruption because it is, but that's a legal definition. So the rot and the rot that is within the NDIS in Australia, same in the Medicaid system over in America. We've seen what Doge has found out in that one. Veteran Affairs is another one that's an open-ended checkbook. The US military, Hegseth, Pete Hegseth has already opened the books to Doge to go find things on that one. And they're already finding huge amounts of levels of waste. So I think America is going to start balancing the books very, very quickly. But there are a lot of challenges coming up, which I don't know if they're... I think with Trump out the helm, I think they'll find a way around it. And I think part of these tariffs is about bringing money back into America so they can deal with these upcoming disasters. So I've just had a thought as well, just going back to Josh's comment about China and the highest quality iron ore. I think people are forgetting, I think it was about 5 years ago, just before COVID, China tried to put a lot of pressure onto the Australian economy by rejecting a shipment. There was like 900,000 tons of Australian coal that they rejected. And what it resulted in is just rolling blackouts. So even though China has a massive economy and they're really, really dependent on us for our iron ore, I think it's our coal, which is the bigger thing that they're dependent on. Because you got to remember, without power, everything stops.
Yep. And
if push comes to shove and China does really start, throwing out roadblocks, trying to put the pressure on Australia to come into bat against America for them, all we have to do is stop the coal and watch how quickly China will grind to a halt.
It's energy that keeps the world going and the economy's going. And of course, China has not embraced the green agenda at all.
No, of course not.
It's not
retarded.
interesting.
Why would you do it?
Exactly. It doesn't make economic sense. What's interesting too is where Trump is also setting up economically the United States, becoming the crypto capital of the world. That's what he wants to see with this US Treasury gathering these kind of assets as well. So he's got a long-term play there as well in relation to reducing inflation. And this is the interesting thing. You'll notice that the price of oil has plummeted in the last few
weeks.
weeks.
Look at the fuel prices. Yeah. Sorry, I don't. We're the largest exporter of gas in the world, but yet we pay, I think it's $1.40 a litre for LPG. We're selling it to Japan. I've heard $9 a litre to Japan, and then they go and wholesale it out. We have so much oil reserves and all that sort of stuff. Why are we paying as much as we do? So America's just, I think I heard a report they've dropped down to $1.48 per litre in America. They pay less for fuel than what we do.
And this is a crazy thing. Australians are hurting, right? How much of our bill is on fuel, right? We've got you got Liberals running a campaign now. We'll reduce the fuel bill, and then our natural gas supplies are massive, and then we've got governments are going woke on us and going, well, we're going to stop putting new builds in terms of housing. They're not going to have gas in these new houses in certain states. It's just crazy. It's just absolutely ludicrous. These are the natural resources we have. Why? And you look at the gas bill that Australians are paying right now. It's just crazy what we have to pay for gas when we have such an abundance of it. And it's high time that Australian citizens started rising up and going, hey, why are you selling it so cheap overseas and you're making us pay for it? We've got high taxes. We're paying high stuff for our natural resources around here. What's the go? And you're letting all this crazy immigration into our nation, pushing the prices of housing up. Can't even get decent rentals these days for a decent price. What is going on? It's just ludicrous.
Yep. So I have to do a big shout out to Martine's Eco Bites. I can't remember what day the shows are on, but she's been a part of Geograph Bay against the offshore wind turbines. They've done an amazing job. A lot of these multinational companies are now actually pulling out of the project because it's just not worth it doing it in Australia because there's too much regulation. This is the only time I'm happy to see the regulations because they're not building the wind turbine. The battle's not totally won yet, but it's a step in the right direction. People are starting to call it out for what it is. And I have to say, absolute huge effort by Martine and doing what she's managed to do, and also Courage is the Cure for raising awareness for a lot of these issues. So, and you look at Australia versus China, I think they built 2,000 coal-fired power stations last year, or over the last couple of years. We haven't built a single one. I can't remember the last time we built one. I can't remember the last time we built a dam. Like, we're just not doing anything at all to secure our energy future. And I think that's one of the major reasons our cost of living is so bad.
We've done a few desalination plants, and I think, well, a couple, but not major.
Yeah, they're not generating electricity. They cost electricity, and they destroy the water.
I'm talking about water. Yeah. I mean, these are the tough questions that need to be asked, but unfortunately, I'm finding my local politician runs away from the tough questions when being asked. What do you do?
Elections not be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a real interesting one. I think, and it'll be interesting to see whether, West Australia votes Labor again. I don't know. I don't know whether we will or not. It could flip and be a shock to everyone.
No.
That'll be fun to watch.
So this is my prediction. I'll go down on the record now. And I think the people who actually care about politics in the direction of Australia is probably 25% of the population at max. I think there's too many people who just don't care. And this is kudos to the mainstream media, the legacy media for this one. They've done an amazing job to make people not care about politics. And so probably a good 45 to 50% of people don't vote for Labor and Liberals purely because, my husband said to vote for this, or I can't be bothered picking one. I saw the ad. This guy looks good on the news. I'll vote for him, sort of thing. And there's just too... what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lack of interest in Australia and what's actually going on in the politics. And I just think we're in for another 4 years of absolute suffering before people actually start going, you know what, things need to change. Things must change. I think Labor's going to win it with a joint teal-green government. And we're going to end up with I think they won't win it on their own right because the cost of living is too bad. But I think between the Greens, the Teals and Labor, we're going to have Albanese for another 3 years. We're going to have an inheritance tax within the next 3 years. And we're going to have a whole heap of environmental taxes for people who don't have solar panels on their roofs and things like that, and homeowners that don't get absolutely shafted in this. And it's just going to be a nightmare. And only then will we get a change of government.
We'll see. I hope you're wrong. I really do. But again, I think the issues are bigger than just a nation changing its political parties too, Travis. I think a lot of the issues that we've got go further than that. I mean, government, in its defense, cops a lot of criticism on it, factors that sometimes it doesn't really have power or should have power over, okay? For example, there are other organisations and bodies that I think are better equipped to do the tasks that often governments come in and do. For example, welfare. I think churches are better set up to service welfare and do it more efficiently than government is. I think government is there to govern, and I think it's fascinating that that's taken over in certain areas. It's a different philosophical debate there, but I think in its defence, I think sometimes we've got to relook at what is government actually controlling, or should it actually step into that playing field.
The only statement I think I support from Scott Morrison is he made the claim that the best form of welfare is a job, and there's a sense of empowerment when you get that money into your paycheck each week, knowing that you've worked hard for this money. I think that's a great way to live your life. I think Australia's just become too much of a welfare state. So going to the charity side of things and stuff like that, I do like the idea of putting it in the hands of churches. I just can't see a majority of Australians supporting that because, you're allowed to discriminate against the big, white, scary Christian man. So I think there's too... I'd love to see it, but I don't think it will happen. I hear what you're saying.
I hear what you're saying. I think it's a twofold approach. I think government certainly influences the economy. We all know that. The best way, as you mentioned, is to get someone out of poverty, is to get them economically viable and producing, being productive in society, contributing. I totally agree. But again, you've got the cost of living problem where they've cut their own foot off in terms of the housing market. So, even if you do want to do that, wages have not increased in line with what property prices have done.
So let me ask you a question here. Do you think Labor's done that intentionally?
Look, I wouldn't be. Oh, that's a loaded question, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is.
Let me not. I won't point towards one particular party on this.
Mm.
I'll speak broadly. Because I don't think it's fair to just point out one political party on it. How many of our politicians have been bought out by overseas bodies,
All of them.
unelected
All
bodies
of
and
them.
officials? That's what I think has
Absolutely,
to be.
all of them.
So it doesn't
and
matter
it's not
which
just
side you get. It doesn't matter which side you get the same result. And I think that's
And
that's what we're facing as a nation.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important to note that it's not just the major political parties that have been brought out, it's also the minor parties as well.
Yes.
And even to the point where I'm going to call out One Nation on this one as well, because you got to remember, WA state election, they sold their number 3 position for the Legislative Council, the upper house, to an Indian guy that was promoting mass immigration from India to rural WA. Like, that goes against the core voter base. Why the hell would you accept someone like that into the party who's openly campaigned against party policies? Like, I just don't, I don't guess what's going on, especially in the freedom movement now as well. It's sort of like everyone's lost their way. Everyone's just trying to vow for points, and they're accepting influences from people they shouldn't be accepting influence from. They've lost their way. I think Australia as a whole has lost its way.
About 20 years ago, I was given a book by one of my American relatives revealing a couple of organizations that were controlling the grooming of politicians into the United States, the Trilateral Commission and those kind of groups. And basically it was saying it didn't matter if you voted Republican or Democrat, you still got a product
Unelected bureaucrat
of these organizations to basically do their agenda. And I wonder, it's a fascinating one. At the time, it sounded pretty crazy 20 years ago with that. I didn't write it off at all, but I think that certainly has come into play when we're seeing billionaires who have been behaved in terms of funding lobby groups across the globe through NGOs to have a political agenda and influence the outcome of different nations. And I think if we look back at that, we have to ask, has that happened in Australia? To what extent has it happened? It has. And who are the groups behind this that are doing it? I know that sounds incredibly conspiratorial, but follow the trail, follow the money. And this is what Doge and these kind of organizations are doing. And I think this is why we're getting so much uproar globally, because this disrupts the whole cash flow and these agendas. And one, it reveals them. They don't like to be revealed. They do it in secret. Secondly, it disrupts their cash flows. And of course, anytime you disrupt someone's cash flow, they get really angry about that. So that's the second thing. And third, it disempowers them, because then you've got an educated public who are going, what? You've been doing what for how long? And they lose all credibility. It's game over. And I think those 3 things haven't reached our shores yet. I think the tracks are very cleverly covered in this nation.
Yeah, it's called political donations. So we've made all that sort of campaigning perfectly legal. You just have a look at all our funding laws and when they actually started and who lobbied for them all. I still think Australia is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, because we've legalized the corruptions, we've legalized the political donations, and not just have we legalized it, we actually give tax incentives to bribe our politicians. So that's why I believe Australia's politically wise is arguably the most corrupt in the world. It's just Elon Musk did a interview, I think it was with Fox Business, and they were talking about why he's doing what he's doing. Why did he head up Doge? Why did he volunteer for this one? And he was saying that everyone's accusing him of doing it for the power and all that sort of stuff. And he stated that as a lobbyist, he's got access to more politicians and he can enforce more authority over the US government, because with his wealth, than doing it what he's doing. It's just he volunteered to do this totally unpaid, huge amounts of damage to his businesses, because he knows if this doesn't happen, America's going to go bankrupt, the economy as a whole is going to crash, they're going to lose the reserve currency of the world, and he's going to lose a hell of a lot more money and freedoms by not doing this than if he did. So, and that's why he's doing it. So,
his
tender's nearly over.
He's being scrutinized every day for what he does. In addition, you've got what everybody wanted at the barbecue. We need a businessman running the country, sort of thing. Well, guess what? You got that with Trump.
You got one.
He didn't need the money. He didn't do it for a public servant's salary. He didn't do it for, he could have quite easily played golf on his beautiful Mar-a-Lago estate and jetted around wherever
Without
he
being
wanted.
shot.
And exactly, without being shot and without having to face all these lawsuits and headaches from the lawsuits. With so much opposition, you've got to ask why. Why did he get so much opposition? What's really at play here? And I think in Australia, it's the discrediting and censorship arm that they like to use a lot in terms of when there is opposition, let's discredit that. And I think how much of the migrant coming in is actually to stop any resistance in terms of the vote at the voting poll. When you see the Labor Party coming in saying councils are taking too long at the citizenship ceremonies. It's this Australia Day. We're fast tracking them and welcoming all these new migrants to become Australians. You go, why are you doing that?
I heard 28,000 people.
And you see these new migrants, I don't blame them coming in, but they don't have the background and knowledge and history understanding, historical, cultural understanding of what these parties have been doing. And so then they are throwing out candy to them. And basically, I'm seeing Dutton go out there and say, we're committing to $8.5 million to build a Hindu school. We're going to now, I've seen my local politician, we're going to enhance your Sikh temple and all this. And I'm going, okay, how many churches are you supporting, which a bigger part of your voter base? How much donations are you giving to the church? I mean, you want to talk about equality? Just follow the money trail.
So I'm looking at the time. It is time for us to wrap up. So I'll give you one final thought for the day. Let's throw it out to the political election. What do you reckon is going to be the outcome, Derek?
I'd love to say we have the volatility that we've seen in the markets enter our election space. That's what my wish and hope would be. I think it needs a bit of waves and a few shocks coming through and this sort of stuff. I don't know whether the Liberal Party's campaigning is going to be strong enough. I don't really also believe that the changing of the party is going to perhaps really change things as far as Australia is concerned. I think it's going to be a tough gig to beat Labor on this one. It's a tough campaign just on the surface, but I think Australians really have to start asking of their politicians the harder questions. We, the people, have to be the opposition for good government because we're not getting it in government, and that's where we've got to go with this. We have to oppose and demand more of our public servants. Yep.
So I think we don't end up with the Labor government. It's going to be a coalition between the Greens, the Teals and Labor. That's how they're going to form the government. I think there's going to be a bouncing back towards the centre. But I think the big news is going to be normally there's about 12% of the population have informal votes where they're just not counted, where they tick the name off, they draw appendages over the things or they scribble some sort of weird stuff over it. I think the informal vote is going to increase from 12% to about 18%. And I think the voter turnout is going to be a lot lower. So I think it's still going to be Labor, but a lot more people just don't give a shit anymore.
Can you put Josh's comment that you just had up there up again? I just want to comment on that. Josh's insight there. He says we're screwed either way. I think what's happening here, it's already in motion, but I think will happen more, Josh, is I think change will probably come from outside influences like we're seeing with the Trump administration, forcing the Australian government to rethink its position and stance on many, many issues and saying you play it this way or get out. And as I've said over the last couple of years, the Goliath in America had to come down first to then have an effect on the rest of the world. And I think that's where the pressure for change may come is from outside influences. And I think that's why our politicians are so scared and they are so discrediting the MAGA campaign and throwing it into the conspiracy bucket and all this sort of stuff. These classic, these discrediting moves that you'll often see the powers to be do.
Josh, I have to say, let's do it. Josh wants to register a political party called No Confidence, and he thinks he'll win in landslide. To be 100% honest with you, if you do that in WA, I think you would win at least one, possibly two legislative council positions, because remember it's only 2.7%. To get the required documentation and all that sort of done, I've done it once before with One Nation. We'll do it again easily. Josh, give us a call. I want to talk to you about that one. I think it's got legs. So, on that note, let's wrap it up. It's been Edge Radio Australia. You can watch live at edgeradioaustralia.com.au. We have some awesome music playing 24 hours a day. Obviously, you can see us on YouTube, Facebook, and all that sort of stuff. We're trying to get our YouTube channel monetized. So please jump on over and like and subscribe on that one as well. It does help to keep the lights on. Also, if you do want to catch up with Derek during the week to do some of his courses, please reach out to him, blueskyfactory.com. I put a post in there earlier. There it is. Boom. Blueskyfactory.com.au. Obviously, no E in the blue. So on that one, we're going to call it a day. Derek, thanks again for running the show from the Edge Studios while I'm traveling abroad.
Thanks for having me, Travis. Great to see you again.
Likewise. Talk soon. See ya.